Good morning. What do you think of when you hear the expression Paul Ambantem? I'm guessing you imagine someone who has just been introduced to something but is trying to act like they invented it, right? Somebody who has just been taught how to do something but is chopping post with it as if he's been doing it since puberty. Yeah, that's who we tend to describe with the expression Paul Ambantem. But think about it for a minute. The actual expression is Paul Ambantem Ochin Izikamfo, which means Paul who came later is greater than those who came before. Now, here's the thing about Paul. By the time he started his missionary work, Jesus had been dead for 16 years. And during that time, Jesus' disciples and all the followers they recruited, all those who met Jesus and witnessed his miracles, all those who had been inspired by being in the presence of the Lord while he carried out his 3-year mission here on earth, had either been executed or had gone into hiding. They had tried to spread the gospel, but it had not been easy at all. Paul, after his encounter on the road to Damascus, took up missionary work under the same dangerous conditions and did it diligently for 16 years until he was executed. Now, during that time, the guy spread the gospel to more parts of the world than anyone else before him. He traveled tens of thousands of miles around the Mediterranean, being thrown in and out of jail, all in the bid to reach as many people as possible with the simple message that Jesus was the Son of God. So when people say Paul Ambantem Ochin Izikamfo, it's actually about legacy. It's about doing more to further the cause of what you believe in than anyone who came before you. So what are you passionate about? Are you an artist, a professional, an administrator, a service provider? Whatever path you have chosen in life, you owe it to yourself and to the world to do something with it that nobody else who came before you could ever do. You owe it to the world, to those who will come after you, to further the cause of whatever you believe in. Take it further. Leave more than you found. You may have come later, but you must do more than those who came earlier. Otherwise, what's the point of having come at all? You know, 7 years ago, we lost the boss player, Komla Dumo. Now, that man invented what we do today. He set a standard in this profession that will never be forgotten. But that means those of us who are inspired by him have a huge responsibility. We must do more than do more. We must take the inspiration that his work gives us and use it to fuel our own efforts in this space. We don't know how long we will be blessed with this opportunity, but we must gear all our efforts in however little time we have left to do more, to leave more than we found, to be greater than those who came earlier. We won't always get it right. We'll make mistakes on the way, but we cannot give up. We cannot stop until we have left our own legacy in whatever space we operate. So, my dear friend, today I want you to think about what legacy you wish to leave once your work is done. How do you want things to be better because of your involvement? Once you decide on what your legacy is, it must then become the engine for everything you do. It must define all your choices and determine the allocation of all your resources, especially your time, from now on. Your legacy becomes your agenda. It is how you will be remembered. It is by your legacy that people will determine whether or not you mattered. It's not about what you do. It doesn't actually matter how important or unimportant you think you are in the grand scheme of things. It must only matter that you were here. My name is Kojo Youngson, and I didn't come before, but those who did inspire me to do more. Good morning, Ganafo.
Hello, good morning and welcome to the AM News with me, Maputa Sibili. Now, in our first story, Deputy General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association, Dr. Titus Bayu, says we cannot conclude that schools are safe until we have a systematic way of assessing the situation in our schools. Speaking on PM Express, Dr. Bayu explained to the extent that the new variant also affects children and the impact being felt health officials need a full assessment on schools. He also added the schools alone cannot be a safe haven whilst the members of the communities are infected.
But we have followed what has happened in Konfanochi, and it's a disturbing trend. And I should say that what is there may be a replication of what can be found in any major teaching hospital in the country.
Okay.
And so I have a problem with statistics that tells us that because few students have reported problems, the problem in the school is little. Until we have had a systematic way of assessing the burden in the school, we cannot make that conclusive statement. So to the extent that this new variant is affecting children, and we can see the impact on children, we need a full assessment of schools to be able to make a statement on the impact on schools. But like we said, the school cannot be a safe haven alone if the entire community is still infected. So we have to tackle the community as well as tackle the school. But we should not base our data on only what we have and say that because we haven't had a report, it means it's not there. If you really want to know whether there are issues in your schools, then you go search for it. Because I have colleagues whose kids have tested positive in their schools. I have friends who have complained their other parents' kids have tested positive in the school. So until you assess in the school, you cannot make that conclusive statement based on only what comes to your facilities.
Still on COVID-related matters, the Food and Drugs Authority says it has approved the first herbal medicine for a clinical trial for COVID-19 treatment. The medicine, known locally as Nibimba, was submitted by researchers from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology School of Public Health in September last year. In a statement, Chief Executive Officer of the FDA, Dalese Mimidako, said the authority gave the go-ahead for the clinical trial last month. There's more in this News Desk report.
In search for a treatment for the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, researchers from the School of Public Health at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology submitted a clinical trial application in September 2020 to assess the safety and efficacy of Cryptolysis sanguinolenta as a potential treatment for COVID-19. This follows results from laboratory studies conducted by the KNUST research team, which points in the direction of possible clinical benefits. The FDA, after detailed assessment of the application, gave the requisite regulatory authorization for the conduct of the trial as per the mandate outlined by Part 8, Sections 150 to 166 of the Public Health Act 2012, Act 851, which gives the authority the legal mandate to regulate clinical trials of drugs, herbal medical products, cosmetics, and medical devices. The trial will be conducted at 2 sites. To this end, the public is admonished to report any suspicious activity on FDA-regulated products to the authority via any of our platforms.
Now, Speaker of Parliament Alban Bagbon is warning that he may be forced to disclose the names of 60 members of Parliament who have refused to undergo testing for COVID-19. The Speaker has also confirmed that some MPs have tested positive for COVID-19. Although Mr. Bagbon did not disclose the names of the MPs affected, he admonished members of the House to take the COVID-19 safety protocols seriously and strictly adhere to them. The revelation by the Speaker follows a 3-day house screening exercise organized by the MPs last week. Less than a third of the House participated in the event, forcing the exercise to be extended.
A directive that all members subject themselves to the test has not yet been complied with by over 60 members of Parliament. It is true, as the majority leader has just stated, that we are not all safe. Even in the House, some members are afflicted by COVID-19. You may not know who the person is because of the protocols, issues of confidentiality. We are not disclosed who are now COVID-19 positive. But we have some of us in that category. And so members should take the protocol seriously. In fact, when I was entering, I myself had to signal to members to respect the physical distancing. The physical distancing protocol. And I saw them immediately move apart. So members should take it serious.
Now, ex-warrant officer Class 1 Ashita Hammond, the 96-year-old military veteran who walked 14 miles to raise funds for the fight against the coronavirus pandemic, has donated personal protective equipment to the Ministry of Health for frontline workers. According to ex-WO1 Hammond, he was inspired by a similar act by a former veteran in the United Kingdom, Captain Tom Moore, who in the lead up to his 100th birthday also walked to raise funds for the fight against COVID-19. Ex-WO1 Ashita Hammond is confident this donation, which included sanitizers, nose masks and bottles of water, will help bolster Ghana's fight against the virus. Kweku Asante has more.
He was 95 at the time, and 2 months from now, he will be 96 years. Ex-warrant officer Class 1 Ashita Hammond set for himself an ambitious target for his age of walking 14 miles to raise money for coronavirus charities. Ex-WO1 Ashita Hammond was inspired by a similar act by UK's Captain Tom Moore, who raised millions by walking in his garden. Today, ex-WO1 Ashita Hammond has donated personal protective equipment and bottles of water to the Ministry of Health for frontline workers. Ex-WO1 Ashita Hammond is hopeful that this act will inspire patriotism in Ghanaians and urged others to donate towards the fight against the pandemic.
I know that once we have done this thing, it's an honor for our country, the whole Ghana and Africa. I work for Ghana and Africa. We have achieved a lot for our country. I thank all of you. Please, my appeal is that support with all your heart this thing. We know all the rich men, they have to come and support. Then to do something for our country. This is all that we are here for. So I'm appealing to you to do this for us.
The items, which included nose masks, sanitizers, were received on the ministry's behalf by the acting chief director, Kwabena Poku Aferi, who thanked ex-WO1 Ashite for this selfless act and promised that the ministry will utilize it in the fight against the pandemic.
You did a walk of 14 miles to raise funds for this. But for me, what comes to mind is that you said that you are donating this to frontliners because you yourself have been a frontliner in the army. But the frontliners that you are giving these to are frontliners in health. And all of you have fought to protect lives. And I believe that is why what motivated you to donate this to the frontliners. We will take these and we believe that they will go a long way to help those who are now at the front line fighting this pandemic, COVID-19.
Ex-WO1 Ashita Hammond was part of the World War II veterans who marched to the castle in 1948 to demand compensation for their war service. During that march, 3 of the veterans were shot and killed. He narrates what happened.
Our deplorable condition, if you don't ask, they won't give you. If the mountains, they don't go to Muhammad, Muhammad must go to the mountains. So we decided to Governor Gira Chrissy to fight for our rights. And on the way, at the crossroads, Superintendent Emery said he won't allow us to go to the castle. We were unarmed. So actually we negotiated with him but he was highly impervious to reason. Now, he asked one of these people to shoot, one of the sergeants. The sergeant was extremely annoyed. So he moved forward. I saw, and the gun, I saw, he raised the gun. If that bullet had missed Sergeant to have landed on me, I wouldn't have been able to stand here today to tell you the history.
Away from that, let's go to the court because President Akufo-Addo's lawyers on Monday subjected NDC General Secretary Johnson Asiedu-Nketia to hours of questioning. Proceedings commenced at 9:30 a.m. when Mr. Nketia entered the box again, but ended after 2 p.m. with a 30-minute break in between. Mr. Nketia is 2020 NDC presidential candidate John Dramani Mahama's witness in a case seeking to set aside the election results as announced by EC chairperson Jean Mensa. Lead counsel for President Akufo-Addo, Akoto Ampao, centered his cross-examination mainly on calculating the total valid votes cast from the results declared by the EC and asking whether or not Nana Akufo-Addo got more than 50% of the votes cast. Court correspondent Joseph Akable has more.
Akoto Ampao, who represents the second respondent's legal team, on Monday continued with his cross-examination of Mr. Johnson Asiedu-Nketia. It focused mainly on confronting him with videos of various leaders of the NDC making statements that Mr. Akoto Ampao said leads to one conclusion that they believe that Mr. Mahama had won the election, yet when they filed a petition in court, they are seeking reliefs that suggest that no one won the election. There was also the bit related to the total valid vote cast. You know that the EC had indicated that the figure of 13.4 million that the EC chairperson mentioned in the declaration was done in error, and rather 13.1 million was the actual figure. And so there was a bit of a back and forth between Mr. Akoto Ampao and Mr. Asiedu-Nketia on that score and asking him to make some calculation, after which the panel had some questions through Justice Yawapel.
My Lord, the NDC had organized several demonstrations with three main objectives. One,
please, I've not asked you.
The killing of innocent voters at polling stations by security officers, and nothing seemed to be happening. The NDC made that was one of the purposes of the press conference. The other purpose of the press conference.
Please, I have not asked you the purpose, so answer my question. Please, and don't be taking instructions.
Can you restate
Don't be taking instructions from, lawyers on this side. Please.
Please, let's observe. Please, Deacon. Please.
My Lord, I know what I'm talking about.
We are closer to them than you. We've not witnessed anything. Please.
Yes, please answer my question, and you had your opportunity to write your witness statement. So now you answer the questions. You understand?
Please, I'm asking the question again, and I answer according to my ability and what I consider to be the answer to the question.
I'm saying that interspersed between these press conferences,
yes,
the NDC organized a series of demonstrations, the object of which was to...
Team is loaded. You see, it is double barreled. Can't you break them?
Organize a number of demonstrations. Is that so?
Yes, we did.
And that's it for the AM News with me, Mapisa CVD.
Well, welcome to another morning as we dig into the papers. And of course, I do this together with Mama V. Owusu. We also have Joseph Akable, our court correspondent, who's going to be walking us through a number of matters, what to expect today, and of course, some of what panned out yesterday. I have this morning the Daily Guide, the Daily Dispatch, the Business and Financial Times.
Stick to the Graphic, Daily Statesman, and the Economy Times. Joseph Akable will join us and do the Ghanaian Times, and I think the Finder newspaper. So if you're ready, well, we thank you for making time and joining us on the review. So let's start with the Daily Graphic newspaper on the front page. Of course, it is to be expected. The election petition But here's the angle that the graphic picks. I never implied Mahama won, according to Asiedun Ketia, who some say was grilled yesterday. And I guess the last... I'm not going there. Okay, so details of his testimony in the paper today. FDA approves clinical trial for COVID-19 herbal medicine. Ban on social gathering. Affected industry players count cost. There are wedding organizers who are complaining. There are MCs who are complaining because they've had to...
why are you saying MCs? I mean, do you have any information?
I'm just really, I'm just talking.
Well, you know, this is not a good season for people who are engaged, whether, what do you even call them? Event planners, decor people, MCs, DJs, not a good time. Because once you hear this, you know that, Charlie, market's now tons.
You can do a virtual MC.
No one pays for that.
No, but I saw a couple, okay. Like on your wedding day, both of you are wearing masks. It looks a bit awkward. Why don't you do a virtual ceremony, okay? So that the pastor, pastor is on Zoom. The two of you are on Zoom. The MC is on Zoom, family and friends.
How do you show, you know, children and others in future, Charlie? This was my, the thing I didn't like. What was that again?
It would be nice, like a photo album, you know, like a video version of it.
The funeral bit, I think the funeral bit you don't really need. But wedding party, Charlie, it be some way.
But how about the one in mask? Like you're in mask and we're getting married.
How will we even know? I mean, how do you even know with the veil and everything? How do you know? The person behind the veil is actually...
we're not in normal times at all. All right, in the center spread, 6 envoys present letters of credence to President. World Leprosy Day commemorated. Ghana yesterday joined the rest of the world to commemorate this year's World Leprosy Day at Ankafo near Omina in the Central Region. The event, which was on the theme Beats Leprosy and Stigma, was held at the Ankafo Leprosarium and General Hospital. Details of that in the paper on the back page. Illegal mining threatens one district, one factory project in Obuasi. So according to this story, there's a one district, one factory project in the Obuasi municipality, which is into oil palm processing and is facing imminent collapse following invasion of its oil palm plantation by alleged illegal miners. Another policeman commits suicide. And I don't like the fact that, you know, people didn't see them commit the acts, but we're comfortable saying blankly, like, you know,
they committed when you don't have all the evidence.
Exactly. So this is also another tragic one, you know, because the policeman is no more. And according to the story, which is also a bit not clear if that's how things unfolded, he was unwell and had been off for a while. Only resumed, I think, on the 29th of January or so. And he wanted some more days, but it wasn't granted. And you know, after that, he was, the last time anybody saw him, well, is it the last time anybody, but, you know, they found him dead.
I mean, the next time anyone saw him, it was his body that they were seeing. But you see, that brings to mind another aspect of all of this that we often overlook. The psychological effects of the work. I mean, in any work environment, you have your own, in the media, like what we're doing now, there are the pressures, and you have to deal with it somehow. In the police service, they also have theirs. And sometimes, I don't know what, you know, systems they have in terms of dealing with the psychological issues, the emotional issues that come up with the work. But I think sometimes, look at this case, like you just mentioned, he wanted more days off. Obviously, he wasn't feeling too well. And while we cannot state categorically that it was suicide, some of these things ought to be taken stock of because, I mean, the work they do is high stress and if not catered for, some of these things.
Sure, but the police service should be worried because this will be the second
in a matter of
in a week,
right?
In a week,
just
actually.
over a week.
No, the other one happened allegedly on Sunday, isn't it? So it will fall within the same week.
So it came within this
was
week.
Exactly. When we come back and we're dealing with the matters proper, I'll touch on this herbal medicine that we're told FDA has approved. That story's been on myjournline.com since yesterday. That will be it really for the Daily Graphic newspaper.
Well, let's get into the Daily Guide now. After that, we'll bring in Joseph Akable. FDA approves COVID-19 herbal med for trial. What's the local name given it? Nibima. Yeah.
You're trying.
I was wondering how it was pronounced, though. Nibima. Okay. I know 2 victims, Takrade kidnapper says. He's still in the news. Samuel Odotuk Wales. Another police officer in suicide. Today, this is not the Ghanaian Times. I know as of yesterday, they wrote allegedly. Well, the Daily Guide is pretty emphatic with it. I didn't bring my figures, as Asiedun Ketia tells judges. Mama V, did you bring your figures this morning? Because it appears yesterday, the General Secretary of the NDC was a bit hot, and Justice Yao Apau took him on at the latter stages, and Charlie, it was some way like Manifest song. But is it? I didn't bring my figures. Yeah, you say I'm coming to court, but if I didn't bring my figures, there are those figures provided by the Electoral Commission that we all know, and we're challenging them, right?
Charlie,
you don't want to get into those tricky waters.
I guess, for all of us who are following, we don't know, and it's not like they're marking your scripts right there, so you actually don't know. Sometimes people actually may think that he probably didn't answer a certain question right, but you never know what they were looking for. You get what I mean? Yeah.
And he kept making reference to, those, if I may cite exactly, if the figures are correct, with reference to what the Electoral Commission, put out, if the figures are correct. And that's actually what Justice Yao Apau had to take him up on at the end, saying, you've kept saying if the figures are correct, if the figures are correct. Now all figures in a way. And that was where...
That's not on your Electoral Commission.
Well. But
don't create problems for your hearts.
I think so far, Asiedun Ketia, if you know the court situation and the scenarios, you would realize that while it may appear comical at some point, I think he's carrying himself pretty well. Well.
I think he did.
Because the pressure, if you've not been in that situation and being bombarded by lawyers and a justice of the court, it's not easy. It isn't.
Yeah.
This one says FDA approves COVID-19 herbal med for trial. I've already taken that. This international story, I've been following it on the BBC, interests me. Military coup in Myanmar as Aung San Suu Kyi detained. And the way things are panning out here, just disastrous, really. Looking at San Suu Kyi's, I remember watching this movie, The Lady, a long time ago, actually based on her life. And what she's done, then coming into power and the sort of spiral we've seen, and now the military, taking over. Interestingly, the military chief also has an Aung in his name. I don't know whether they are related in any way.
This issue is one of those tricky ones, and I'm not sure that I've heard many people comments. I guess because of the disappointment that people felt.
Yeah.
I remember, when the minority group in Myanmar were attacked by the military, when it was reported, Aung San Suu Kyi, I remember very well, everybody wanted her to condemn.
I was so disappointed because she didn't.
That didn't happen.
She stayed away from that.
And that didn't happen for a very long time. So I don't know. I guess it's news to us in terms of this takeover.
World War II veteran supports COVID-19 fight. We've been telling you a bit about that. And when you turn to the back page of the Daily Guide, tight security for Martial. I'm talking about Manchester United's Anthony Martial, who has asked Manchester United to help with security at his house after racist trolls targeted him and his wife online. A lot of people have been talking about this. Say no to racism, but the real beat is Charlie Martial in the team. And I don't like racism, of course not. But his football,
so people are targeting him because he's not doing so well on the pitch. Is that it?
Yes, partly.
And they're taking it home.
Yeah, they're taking it.
Oh, that's a shame.
They're overdoing it, so to speak. So
even Lampard, they let him go. They said he's still a legend.
What was that dig at the police? Yo, Lagos Sports Director gets UNESCO post. That's how I wrap it up on the Daily Guide. You, Okay.
It's Joseph with us. All right. Joseph Akable, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mama Viosu Apwaje and Benjamin Akaku.
You know, yesterday, do you also have to watch your comments? Or you don't wear the robe and the wig? You're free?
Oh, I'm free to the extent that I don't make comments that are in a contempt situation.
You are close to the court. You are in the premises. It's very close to the court, so no problem.
You know how I like the backstories, Joseph? Yesterday during Akotampal's cross-examination, there were moments where he was either shutting his team up or he looked frustrated at some point. When the cross-examination is going on, are they trying to tell him something?
It actually happens on all sides, including the Electoral Commission sides and the side of the petitioner. You know, it's a whole legal team. The difference I've seen with the side of Mr. Chikata is when Tony later wants to say something to him, he writes it on a piece of paper and puts the paper in front of him. And trust me, it's very interesting. I wish our cameras were upstairs as well. Mr. Chikatan does not pick the paper up. Like in talking, he turns a little bit, then you see him look down while he's still talking, then he continues with what he's doing. Sometimes the paper comes from as far back as Sami Jemfi, who writes a note, gives it to Eduji, who is just behind where the lawyers sit. Then Eduji hands over the paper to Mr. Lita, who puts it on the table. Mr. Chikata never picks the paper up. I've seen the EC side too. One Miracle Atachi, who is part of the legal team, also come with a tablet and show the tablet to Mr. Amenuvo as well. For the side of the second respondent, what I've seen done is that they tend to communicate. And so because of the microphones being off, so they turn it off or they try and talk. Because you know they are in the mask, you may not necessarily hear what they are saying, but those who are closer, you see.
But we hear what their lead counsel says.
He was making the point. There was one that the microphone was a bit on, so he was saying that he can't. He said, "I can't confront them with the EC's figures." That one I think is on social media.
No, yeah, because we also had it clearly here.
Yeah.
And the bit about the court's technical team, their IT people. I think this had to do with the pen drive, and when they were not finding the exact folder, the commentary back there was they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. I think at some point they wanted to go and show them.
The court was informed that the EC's lawyer has been able to successfully open the file, and so they should take a look at that file.
Yeah, and then there was also another light moment there after Asiedun Ketia was discharged. What did they wanted to know his general position?
Oh, they were making a point that in his witness statement and even in his introduction, he had not indicated that he is the general. And Mr. Nketiah's response was that, when Justice Yaope was about asking him the question, he said, "General, you've been saying if did you come with your own figure?" So he made a point that the general had already been announced by a senior member of the panel. So the general is officially on record. And he made a point that, he had said at a point that he was palm wine. He was into palm wine distillery, and so they made a point to him that he should make some of the palm wine available to the panel as well.
Yeah,
the sort of things that go down in court.
Yeah. There were lots of quotable moments yesterday when Akotampal says, "Don't create problems for your hearts." He was talking to Asiedun Ketia. Well, anyway, let's go through the papers that you have, Joseph.
Yes, I have two of them. I have the Ghanaian Times and a couple of other papers. So let me start quickly with the front page of the Ghanaian Times this morning. It says, Akufo-Addo crossed 50% +1 to win election, Akoto-Ampao affirms. And the government tightened restrictions to curb COVID-19 surge, also on the front page of the Ghanaian Times. And it has another image here talking about how to wear a non-medical fabric mask safely. So that is some good advice there. In terms of the back page of the Ghanaian Times. It has this story about the FDA. It says FDA NMRA approved herbal medicine. And that is the Noguchi Memorial Research Institute, I think. I should think so. Let me just be sure about it. The Food and Drugs Authority and the National Medicine Regulatory Agency. So that's the National Medicine Regulatory Agency. We are told that they've approved herbal medicine for COVID-19 clinical trial. That's on the back page of the Ghanaian Times. The front page of the Finder now, it has some stories related to the court. Asiadu Nketia fails to produce NDC's own collated figures. It's on the front page. And if your case is bad, even the most skillful general will be exposed upon Nkrumah. 90% of our members received stimulus package. Aboso Kai spare parts dealers thank Nana Addo. And another policeman commits suicide, also on the front page. CEO of Radio Gold, Bafo Boni, is dead. It's another story, very sad one there. And FDA approves herbal medicine for COVID-19 clinical trials, also on the front page of the Finder newspaper.
All right, let me do the Daily Statesman newspaper front page. Akufo-Addo's 50% plus one score confirmed as Asiadu Nketia runs from his own witness statement in court is the interpretation they put on this bit of his testimony. Also, 6 envoys present credentials to President. Bank of Ghana maintains policy rate at 14.5%. It comes with a picture of the Bank of Ghana Governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, who you may know by now that he's gotten another offer. He's staying at the Bank of Ghana for another 4 years. On the back page, they've got some sports stories. I'll leave that to Rico Ampo for when he comes right after the review with details in sports. So that's it for the Daily Statesman newspaper.
Let's quickly catch up with what the Daily Dispatch says. It says videotapes of Mahama and Asiadu Nketia claiming NDC won 2020 played in court. 2020 parliamentary results. You can check that on pages 3 and 6. Ibrahim Mahama, from a school dropout to a top businessman. You know, some of these stories, you can find that on page 11, but they make people think, school no cry on Charlie. Because you look at the Bill Gates and the Zuckerbergs but then others would ask you, where did they drop out of? They are dropping out of Harvard and the rest. I was saying, it is not true. NPP MPs are not supporting relief for students, Afenyo Markin, and then meet the journalist who worked at the castle and armed one of Rawlings' unknown bodyguards. So those stories are in there. On the back page, you would find a story about Rawlings' only surviving paternal sister, Judy John. And if you know why the John is at the end, because his name was actually, when he joined the military at a point, there was that error, but John was actually his surname. And then videotapes of Mahama and Asiadu Nketia claiming NDC won last year's polls played in court. Mamavi, I'll just do this one. So for this story, the excerpts, it says, Asiadu Nketia, my lords, what transpired between Asiadu Nketia and Akoto Ampao after the tapes were played? Asiadu Nketia, my lords, those are my pictures and those are the words that came from my mouth. Akoto Ampao says, I'm putting it to you that in the video you said the NDC had won 4 seats and that puts us in a clear majority and will be giving President Mahama the needed majority in parliament. Nketia responds, my lords, those are my words. Akoto Ampao comes back, I am putting it to you that you thereby implied that President Mahama won the elections. And then Asiadu Nketia says, my lords, I implied that I expected President Mahama to win the elections. Every evidence was pointing at Mahama's victory. And in fact, my laws permit me, in all the 7 parliamentary and presidential elections that have been held in the country before this one, the presidential candidates and the political party which wins and controls parliament ends up winning the presidency. And then Akoto Ampao comes in. Mr. Asiadu Nketia, don't lecture us, answer the questions. You can't lecture us. If you missed it, those are some of the scenes from yesterday. And I don't think the heat is going to get any better. So maybe later, Joseph will tell us about what to expect. More fireworks today, likely.
All right, time for us to dig into more of what's in the papers.
Okay, so you're done with your stack?
Yeah, I'll let the Economy Times go because, you know, the debts issue, I think you read it yesterday in one of the papers.
Okay, so I'll just add this one from the Business and Financial Times. Pandemic's new wave pushes Bank of Ghana to stay policy rate again. That's another topical one. All right, so let's delve into the details now.
I want to talk about this clinical trial for COVID-19 herbal medicine, but just so I don't forget, because I forgot it yesterday, there was news coming from the Ashanti region, and Joseph, it has to do with your people, the lawyers, and I think the story was that there were some lawyers in the Ashanti region, maybe to be specific in Kumasi, who were can I say defrauding, taking people's wives and cars and things like. Yeah. What is that about? And the GBA can't do anything about those things?
Has it got to the attention of the GBA?
Says when the petition comes to it, they take it over to the General Legal Counsel. You know, the General Legal Counsel is the one that can exercise that kind of restraint, especially when it relates to professional conduct. And so those matters are referred. The Vice President of the GBA in the region explains that when those petitions come, they try to engage the lawyers who question the jurisdiction of the GBA to deal with it. So eventually they have to refer it to the General Legal Counsel. And when it goes, she says, we know what happens there. Some of them are disbarred or suspended for a period of time. And so that is what is happening. But yes, the claim is that the lawyers are defrauding their clients, taking their clients' cars. Some lawyers, I must add, and others are taking people's wives as well. And,
but you know,
I shared a link on Facebook and my lawyer friends were not too happy.
When I read it, Joe, and Ben, I was thinking, so how did they take the wives? Like, is it because they can't pay for their services? So they exchange that with their wives or what? I understand the cars bit.
That one beats
but I don't know.
Honestly. The car bit I can get, but a wife, I mean. Or maybe it could be that, the lawyers were.
The circumstances leading to the taking.
No, Joe, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm saying taking is taken. Like, I mean, they've taken. I mean, whether it was as payment for legal fees or not, they've still taken a wife.
Everything we take.
Okay, no, listen, but on a more serious, we hope that they will be able to uproot all those bad nuts. I mean, some of the stories that people shared from our reports was that sometimes they know that you have such a bad case, they will not advise you. They will lead you on, and then you lose and they still would take their fees. But the point is, whether you lose or not, that one, they've worked for you. It doesn't matter that you lost. They will still have to
I was just about to add that. You must also go with some, intelligence, pursuing whatever matter. And if you feel it's not going to wind up in anything, why waste your resources? Because some of these lawyers, look, some of them are not getting enough cases. That's the reality and all of that. They will want a case where they'll earn their bread. So you must also be circumspect.
Okay, so this FDA approves clinical trial. So what it means is that they would test on volunteers, human volunteers, okay, to see whether they should be approved for wider use in the general population. And we pray that this really, really works. You are asking for the name, how to pronounce the local name of this herbal medicine. It's Nibima. I'm sure it would come from one of our local languages or something like that. But the scientific name is what I want to try. Cryptolepsis sanguinolenta.
Reminds us of our days of Musa Sapientum and Charlie. Don't go there. Let's leave this one for the scientists. But
thank you.
But the Nibima, okay, I know that our local languages, right, we don't observe a lot of stress patterns like Kofi, it's flat. So I was thinking Nibima would be, because Nibima sounds more anglicized, but...
Oh, so more like Nibima. That's what you mean?
Kind of.
Oh, okay.
Like, but why even bother about pronunciations? It is what it is. And at least the FDA has been telling us they are grade 3 when it comes to the World Health Organization's rankings, which means that what they're doing in this respect, it's tried, it's tested. We just want to know how effective this will be. There are some benefits.
Actually already being used as a herbal treatment for malaria. Yeah.
So some benefits.
It's already on the market.
Question now would be whether they can add other things to make it even more effective against COVID-19.
I can understand why it is associated, because we know that malaria medicines are being used in the treatment of COVID-19. So, all right, any other picks?
I'll do this one from the Daily Guide newspaper on page 11. Very worrying one. Zokogu residents cry for water. And the dry season in the Upper East region is becoming severe, and as usual, communities have started experiencing drought as their streams and dugouts have either dried up or the water levels have drastically reduced. One such community is Zokogu in the Bongo district in the region. For years, the residents of the community lacked a reliable source of water that could have served them for up to even 6 months. It goes on to say the community lacks boreholes, and residents have been complaining that they have been forgotten by successive governments and DCEs. And so that's a call there by this community. According to Azure Ayampoka, a resident of Zokogu, there is one borehole in a nearby community that serves both communities, saying, now that we're in the dry season, we have to wrestle for water. It is a real struggle. And this is reality right here. We sit in Accra and sometimes think everything is here in Accra. Now, here's a community struggling just for something as basic as water. Look at the SDGs and what they say. So that's okay. Just the story I wanted to touch on.
Nice. Joseph?
The suicide story, you know my background is I'm a pocket psychologist, you know that. Yeah, it was a bit of a worry to me. And it's I always say that there's an aspect of our society that we don't pay attention to, mental health. A lot of the time when you meet people and you ask them, how are you doing? It's like the default response must always be, I am fine. But we need to get to the level where people should know that there's nothing wrong with saying that, look, I'm sad, or I just don't feel myself. Because the psychology and the data available in that science indicates that when people talk about their problems, when you talk about your problems, even without getting solution, that alone helps ease the burden that it places on you, or it puts you under. And so let's try and open up to people that we trust, and learn to trust and open up to people in that manner. And also, when you are friends with someone and you realize that a person is withdrawing a bit, because a lot of the time that's how those things start. People withdraw, they don't talk much. You see clearly that this colleague of yours is changing in how the person is behaving, and you don't pay attention to it. And eventually the next thing you hear is that, such a thing has happened. When maybe if someone had interacted with the individuals involved, that is to assume that it's actually suicide that has taken place. Because I agree with the point that Amavi made earlier, that starting the investigation should always not start from the belief that, look, it is suicide. There are people who kill people and set up the police to look at suicide. But I think generally we also need to pay attention to the mental health of our colleagues and try and open up and interact with people more, so that we'll be able to deal with this. Because as a friend was saying the last time, Charlie, pressure day town.
Pressure day.
Yeah.
But before you delve into the court issues, and Mama V, just wanted to add this. That's why we even say that a problem shared is a problem halved, oftentimes. But at the same time, in our own community, our society, and the rest. So you keep everything inside, and before you realize, it's an explosion or an implosion, if you like. Joe?
I say to myself all the time, especially when I'm breaking, it's okay not to be okay. And there's a piece of music that says that to me, and I play it when I get to that point. Listen, we're not superhuman, so, we all have problems. We all have our own problems. So thank you, Joseph, for highlighting on that. Let's talk about what we should expect today going forward. Is Professor White in the box?
Yes, Dr. Michael Professor White, and he will be cross-examined based on his claim that he was in the National Collation Center and they discovered in the course of the collation that there were errors, and they tried to bring it to the attention of the Electoral Commission chairperson, only to be told to go and consult Mr. Mahama at his residence. When they got to the residence, they saw the declaration was being done on TV. And so that petition, if you recall, Mr. Asiedun Ketia was asking questions about the petition and whether or not those concerns in the petition are incorporated into the main petition that was filed by Mr. Mahama. And so that would be the center stage for those particular questions. You recall that there was a question also to Mr. Asiedun Ketia about some regional results that had been signed by Rojo Metununu, and he had made a point that Dr. Professor White was in a strong room and would testify to that. And so that issue would also come up equally. And so Dr. Michael Professor White will be in the box this morning.
So I take it that we should not expect a long cross-examination because the aspect of his testimony is limited to the strong room. Is that the sense that I get?
It's limited to the strong room, but I mean, certainly Mr. Kotampa will have some questions and may require of him to make use of the calculator as well. And so we have to see how that goes. But what we are sure of is that the Electoral Commission, as lawyer, as we've seen over the period, he's quite direct and sticks to what he wants to put across quickly and wraps up. And so hopefully that will not take too long. But I mean, it's all it depends on what the lawyers intend to do. I mean, so maybe at the close of day, God willing, we'll be able to wrap up with Dr. Pesa White so that we now move to the EC chairperson. And
then there's also the Peter McMahon also standing by, right?
That is so.
All right, Joe. We thank you for joining us here on the review. We'll let you go. I'm curious. Joseph, stay. The seats that you have, is it your seats? It doesn't matter what time you get to the court. The number is your number?
Yes, it's number 87. That is my number. It's upstairs. And there's that seat that I've sat in all throughout. If you come in and someone who does not have a number decides to sit on your seat, you can drive the person away. But that's my seat number. And that is the seat that I've used all through the period.
Okay.
And is it tied in any way to the observation of the COVID protocols and all of that?
Yes, there's good spacing. And so no one sits close. So one seat, there's a space, then another seat comes in. And the same thing is done downstairs as well, where the lawyers and the parties to the case also sit. There's one seat, then a space in between, and all the seats are equally numbered. You have an accreditation tag that has your number on it as well. And so I have never gone to meet someone in my seat. It's always empty when I get in.
But Joe, are you guys using fresh air or you're in an air-conditioned courtroom?
It's an air-conditioned courtroom, I must say.
All right.
But I mean, you know how the Supreme Court is. It's those old buildings where the roof is quite far off. You know, the old type of building, not the current ones where the roof is quite close to you. The roof is far off. So it's like a very spacious place, very huge building.
Okay. All right, Joe. Thank you very much. All the best with the court proceedings today. Joseph Akable is our friend and our court correspondent. He will be in court for the election petition. Remember, if you want to have a conversation with us, and we thank you for using our hashtag AM show, is already in the trends this morning.
Good morning and welcome to the AM Sports with me, Oriku Wampofo. We do start off from the local scene where President Nana Akufo-Addo urged the Ghana Football Association to ensure compliance with the 25% capacity rule in our stadium. Now, this was in order to curb the spread of COVID-19, and the president he made this disclosure in his update number 23 on Sunday. Now, Ghana Football Association Secretary Prosper Harris-Nado has also taken the same stance, urging fans not to disappoint the president. We do have more for you in the following report. Less than a month ago, the government of Ghana eased restrictions on football being played behind closed doors. According to the Ministry of Youth and Sport, matches were allowed to be played with fans up to 25% of the stadium's capacity. Although fans were allowed to match venues, health protocols such as wearing of masks, sanitizing of hands, and observing social distance were expected to be followed. However, that hasn't been the case so far, with fans failing to observe these protocols. The latest episode had to do with the various derbies which generated so much public interest. In the Manchester derby, fans were seen hugging and celebrating without face masks on. Similar occurrences took place in Obuasi as Ash Gold held Asante Kotoko to a 0-0 draw at the Langley Stadium. The president, Nana Akufo-Addo, in his 21st State of the Nation address, warned the National Sports Authority and the Ghana Football Association to ensure the protocols are observed in match venues.
The National Sports Authority and the Ghana Football Association should ensure compliance with the 25% capacity rule in our stadia, with spectators respecting the social distancing rule and wearing of masks.
General Secretary of the Ghana Football Association, Prosper Harris-Nado, has also urged fans to take responsibility and take care of themselves if they decide to attend football matches.
I'll plead again to all soccer-loving fans who go to our various stadia, that when you wear your mask and you enter, please don't take it off. And then when you go in, to ensure that there is social distancing, as we've put in our protocol. So when you sit at one seat, make sure there's a space between you and the next person. Very often you see people aggregating. Even though there are seats to the left, seats to the right, we will plead. The stewards will come around to urge you to move. Please, when they come, cooperate with them. It's for the safety of all of us. And we can only ask for more if we do this right. I know a lot of people are doing it right, but a few so far are giving us cause for concern. You'll notice that during the Kotoko match, the announcer keep announcing that people should put on their masks, because we realized a lot of were had their masks on, but a few had removed the masks, even though they had it. They have removed it, and some are holding it in their arms, some have put it in their pockets. The mask is for a purpose, like I said, it's for our protection. So we urge that everybody will abide by the protocols. And for the clubs, they know that if they don't ensure these things, there are punishments. And so we'll plead with them. The safety and security officers of the club who were trained, they know exactly what to do. The work may be difficult at times, but they should be vigilant. If they need the help of the security officers on the ground, they should call on them, so that we have a smooth season.
The Ghana Premier League continues with midweek fixtures in match day 12, and the Ghana... Speaking of match day 12 of the Ghana Premier League, Ken Faisal are back on track after a stuttering start to the season. At the weekend, they came from 3 goals down to beat Courtroom Chelsea in a Week 11 encounter. Now they face Great Olympics this afternoon in a midweek clash. And we're speaking to Abdul Wadud Osman, who's a sports journalist who follows the Ken Faisal team very closely. Now, it's a pleasure to have you here, Wadud. Let's first of all talk about, that after feeling. Now, Ken Faisal had this incredible comeback against Courtroom Chelsea. What's the mood like in the camp ahead of the game this afternoon?
Oh, my brother, thank you very much. And let me say good morning to all your listeners on journalists. Yeah, the feeling is very, very great. The feeling is very, very great in the camp of Ken Faisal. Looking at what we did last weekend against Courtroom Chelsea, I can tell you now, when you come to the camp, you could clearly see the morale in camp is very, very high. Before our game against Courtroom Chelsea, we knew we have a very good team. And looking at how we were dropping points, everyone didn't like how the team were just drawing points. But against Courtroom Chelsea, Coach Andy Sinasi made it clear to the boys, we are capable of beating Courtroom Chelsea. Even before our game against Courtroom Chelsea, if you watch our game against 11 Wonder, we lost the last touch of the game, and Prince Okweku punished us. So coming into the game against Courtroom Chelsea, we were so confident that if we can play the same game we played against 11 Wonders, we are capable of beating Courtroom Chelsea. So going down by 3-0 in that game, even in the first 18 minutes, you could clearly see the boys were in very, very confident mood that they can come back and win the game. And clearly, if you watch our game this season, we create the chances, we play all the pleasing football, but the goal scoring has always been our problem. And thank God, I think against the Courtroom Chelsea, the boys showed their spirit. They came back stronger and scored 3 beautiful goals in the second half for us to win the game. So I think when you come to the camp of Ken Faisal, the morale is very, very high ahead of our game this afternoon against Great Olympics.
Do go into this game with some good amount of form before that loss, against prior to the Courtroom Chelsea match. Ken Faisal were unbeaten in 3 games, drawing 1-1 in 3 consecutive games. Certainly, there's an upturn when it comes to their form. What do you think is the secret, and what's Sinison doing right with this team?
Yes, I was there when Coach Slavisa Bosic. Took over the club, and I saw what he was doing. Slavisa Bosic did well with the club, and it's nothing as brought in a new spirit. I think the team spirit has now even developed more. He's more with the players. He's more close to the players. And even sometimes when the team is in the bus going to a game, you could plainly see Anderson leading the charge when it comes to the Jama and the rest. And even in the changing room, he is so close with the players. The players feel free to talk with him. I think he has brought in that unity in the team. After that, there are some players who I think they didn't get that chance during La Vista Boshi Tamba, and there's nothing came in, and he has given them chance. Players like Enoch Morrison, the likes of Michael Amo, were not playing during Coach La Vista Boshi Tamba. I think when and there's nothing came, he has given some of them chance, and they are proving. Enoch Morrison has started in our last 4 games, and he has been playing very well. Same as Michael Amo before his injury against 11 Wonders. So I think the coach has brought in something new. And remember, we were playing 3-4-3 formation during Coach La Vista Boshi Tamba. This coach has come in with a different system. In some games, we play 4-2-3-1. In some games, we play 4-4-2. And in some games, we play 4-3-3. So I think he has also changed the system. And I remember very well in our game against the Chelsea, he told me how he started with 4-4-2 formation. And after going 2 goals down, he changed the system to 4-1-2-3 formation, which for me, I think it worked very well for the team. So for me, and this nothing has changed a lot at the club. And the players feel very happy working with him. We are just hoping he will get the luck so that we can get a lot of wins going forward.
All right, thank you very much, Abdul Wadud Osman. He's a sports journalist who follows the King Faisal team closely, and King Faisal themselves are in Accra to face Accra Great Olympics this afternoon in midweek fixtures for the Ghana Premier League match day 12.
Akotampa, who represents the second respondent's legal team, on Monday continued with his cross-examination of Mr. Johnson Asiedu Nketia. It focused mainly on confronting him with videos of various leaders of the NDC making statements that Mr. Akotampa said leads to one conclusion, that they believe that Mr. Mahama had won the election, yet when they filed a petition in court, they are seeking reliefs that suggest that no one won the election. There was also the bit related to the total valid vote cast. You know that the EC had indicated that the figure of 13.4 million that the EC chairperson mentioned in the declaration was done in error, and rather 13.1 billion was the actual figure. And so there was a bit of a back and forth between Mr. Akotampa and Mr. Asiedu Nketia on that score, and asking him to make some calculation, after which the panel had some questions through Justice Yawapel.
My Lord, the NDC had organized several demonstrations with 3 main objectives. One,
please, I've not asked you.
The killing of innocent voters at polling stations by security officers, and nothing seemed to be happening. The NDC made that was one of the purposes of the press conference. The other purpose of the press conference.
Please, I have not asked you the purpose, so answer my question. Please, and don't be taking.
Can you restate?
Don't be taking instructions from, lawyers on this side, please.
Please, let's observe. Please, Deacon. Please.
My Lord, I know what I'm talking about.
We are closer to them than you. We've not witnessed anything. Please.
Yes, please answer my question, and you had your opportunity to write your witness statement. So now you answer the questions. You understand?
Please, I'm asking the question again, and I answer according to my ability and what I consider to be the answer to the question.
I'm saying that interspersed between these press conferences,
yes,
the NDC organized a series of demonstrations, the object of which was to...
Team is loaded. You see, it is double barrack. Can't you break them?
Organize a number of demonstrations. Is that so?
Yes, we did.
And one of the clear objectives of these demonstrations was that the petitioner had won the elections and the EC should not subvert the will of the people.
My Lord, the objective that relates to the presidential elections was that the results as declared were flawed. And the commission itself has accepted that the results were flawed, and that's why they kept changing the figures.
All the figures that were mentioned as the valid vote cast and all those things, you were saying if the figures were correct, and that there were inconsistencies in the figures. I want to ask you, now, in your own calculation, what were the total valid votes cast in the presidential elections on 7th December 2020? In your own calculations.
My Lord, those calculations are reserved for a meeting for us to reconcile the figures, because the first respondent herself keeps changing the figures. And so it says, when you bring your...
Excuse me, Mr. Muketia, help the court. You see, when you started giving evidence, you said you had all representatives across the 275 constituencies. You said you put agents to use the, yes, and they were to, collect the figures. You said it. Then he's asking you that from that, what figure did you get? You.
My Lord, I haven't brought that figure to court.
Okay. Then, from your own calculations, what were the valid votes cast in favor of the petitioner, to your knowledge?
My Lord, when we discovered this discrepancy, it was difficult to even know which figures are.
You don't know, you just answer. You don't know.
I don't have them here.
Okay, then the last one. What figures from your own calculations did the second respondent get as the total valid votes cast in his favor?
My Lord, I don't have those figures here.
Thank you. That's what.
The various legal teams spoke to the press at the close of proceedings on Monday.
An exposure on the lack of candor. You heard the 3 questions that the bench asked. That for all that you have said, when you finished your collation, what were your results? When you finished your collation, what were the results that the petitioner got? When you finished your collation, what were the results that the second respondent got? And it was, I believe it will be very surprising to the millions of NDC supporters across the country who were egged on by the same team that they had numbers to prove they had won. Now here in court, when the bench asked those questions, they say that they did not come to court with any of those numbers. They are not still able to put any numbers before the court, despite all that they had said.
We are here challenging the EC on its own figures. Its own figures. What are those figures? There's the 9th of December, there's the 10th of December so-called correction, and there's also the figure in their paragraph 24. And then today we realize that even in some of the constituencies, and they themselves brought out the example, Techiman South, there are errors. So if you ask us, what are our own figures? How are we going to get our own figures based on all these flawed sheets and different figures? And so we stand by what we are saying, that based on her own declaration, nobody got more than 50%.
Hearing continues. So on Tuesday morning, Dr. Michael Pesa-White will be in the witness box reporting for Joy News from the Supreme Court. My name is Joseph Akable.
So that's how things went down on Monday. Joseph Akable putting that report together for us. Let's have a conversation. Let's analyze what has happened with this election petition. My guest joining me via Zoom, Kojoga Daudu is a lawyer. He's a member of the NDC's legal team. Also, Dr. Poku Edusei is also a lawyer and a member of the NDC MPP, I beg your pardon, communication team. And Justice Abdullah is a law lecturer. He's with the UPSA School of Law. A very good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mama V. I trust you're doing well.
I am very well, Justice. Are you 100% well yourself?
I'm sure I'm close to 80%.
Okay.
So there'll be intermittent coughings and stuff.
Great.
And so you may have to pardon me for that.
We'll deal with that. Dr. Poku Edusei, can you say hello back to me so I can check your sound level?
Hello.
Yes, sir. Dr. Poku Edusei, I did hear you. Efo Kojoga Daudu, can I hear you? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining me and of course for being on the AM show. I want to start off, maybe we can all help ourselves. You are all lawyers and you've had people in the box before, I guess. So when you're doing cross-examination, what are you essentially looking out for? I probably would want to start with you. Let's just say maybe Dr. Poku Edusei.
Right. Good morning, Mama V, to your viewers and listeners. Cross-examination mainly is supposed to achieve the purpose of you either discrediting the witness who is on the stand in the witness box, or putting your case across so that you undermine their case when you do that. So essentially, when the lawyers for the second respondent got the opportunity, that's what they sought to do. First, to confront the witness with his past activities so that he'll be discredited as someone who should not be taken serious, because all this why he claimed with other aficionados that the petitioner had won. And when he came to court, the story is different. The other aspect also was that he was made to appreciate that no matter how you twisted figures, definitely the outcome of the results wouldn't change. The second respondent will get at least 50% as required by the 1992 Constitution. So basically, that was what was achieved yesterday by Mr. Kojoga.
Okay, and you've concluded there. So let me go to Kojoga Daudu and also ask, first of all, what would you be looking out for during cross-examination and whether or not your witness did justice to your case?
Well, exactly. Let me say good morning to our cherished viewers also. Let me add to what my colleague, my learned friend also said. When it comes to the purpose of cross-examination, is also to find out whether the person who is testifying has a personal knowledge of the case, what is happening, or what has been brought. Now, whilst he said about credibility, also your opponent, let me say the respondent, whilst cross-examining, is also to put their case forward, because the witness or the petitioner has a case. He's looking for some relief. So he has made his case in his witness statement. So you want to contradict that and also put your case forward. That's what we saw that the lawyer for the second respondent was trying to put their case with the figures that no matter what you do, it will be insignificant, and he has crossed the threshold, that is the 50% threshold as the Constitution dictates. Now, whilst you are doing cross-examination, also, the witness would also want to state his case, that this is the case that I brought. So if you see yesterday, when the second respondent lawyer was putting to him the figures, he was telling the court that the reason why I came to court was the unconstitutionality of the declaration. That is one of the reasons I have come. And secondly, the mathematical error calculating. When you put all the figures together with that of the other presidential candidates, you will get more than what they have said, or the percentage-wise, it will be over 100%. I think that is the point the petitioner's witness was also putting across. So the purpose, to get summarized, the purpose of cross-examination is maybe to attack the credibility of the person, that is not a credible person, he cannot be taken seriously. It's also to put your case across as the respondent or defendant. You also put your case across it. That was why we saw that the second respondent's lawyer was trying to bring their evidence that they are going to use the witness statement to use it through him.
Okay.
Hitherto, position of the law was that you can put your case across by using your evidence. You tender it to him. When we say you tender, is you give it to him to look at it and admit it. The court will admit it through him that yes, he's seen it, he's identified. But I think, as the court itself had also indicated, there are some challenges with what we now call witness statement, where witness statement simply means that what you were going to sit in the box to say, now you reduce it and write it. So whilst it is written, you add all the documents that you are supposed to.
Sure.
So when you add the documents, it has to be determined at pre-trial whether they'll be used.
Okay.
But because it was not done, those are the challenges. That's why you continue to hear that Mr. Chikata gets up and says, as it is now, it is not yet evidence.
Yes.
But the court said, yes, we know it is not yet evidence, but whether that can be admissible or not. So it is the same point of law all the opposing sides were arguing about.
To a large extent, just briefly, you were satisfied with your witness? Did he do good to the petition that you put forward to the court?
Yeah, exactly. Because I summarized it, the two issues or the three issues that we took, and we said that one, the unconstitutionality of the declaration. Two, we said there was the mathematical error. And three, the bias.
Okay, all right.
The EC has displayed.
Okay.
And the circumstances. So he has put our case clearly.
All right, great. I'll come to the other matters, but let me talk to Justice Abdullahi. There was some re-examination, and that's why I want us to concentrate a little bit. We saw Mr. Chachikata try to explain a few things, but on the issue of Ayensuano, we know that the court did not allow. Can you also give us a bit of education in terms of the importance of re-examination?
Well, essentially, when a party is allowed, when a party is called upon to re-examine his witness, he's simply supposed to untie the knot that were that occasion that during the cross-examination stages, assuming there were any form of ambiguity. In fact, then this will be an opportunity to demystify and indeed explain those ambiguities. But what should be clear is that re-examination is not the time for a person to re-argue his case or re-establish his case, or in another, or sometimes, as we put it, to clarify. To attempt to undo the necessary corrections to the damage caused to his case. Most people would want to take advantage of doing a re-examination to better their case when they realize that the cross-examination didn't go in their favor. But I think lawyers are all clear in their minds that that is not the purpose of re-examination. It is simply to ensure that if there were any ambiguities, give an example by way of time. Let's say the person said, "Oh, he came at five." the declaration were made at 5. Now, clearly, this 5 could be a morning 5 or evening 5. Now, during re-examination, you'll be allowed to clarify what this 5 means. Is it 5 as in 5 p.m. or 5 as in 5 a.m.?
Okay.
But so beyond this one, you are not allowed to re-examine. So, yeah, as usually happens.
Okay.
Once you realize a lot of things went bad during cross-examination, most lawyers would insist on re-examining just so they can have the opportunity to as it were, better their case and do away with all the bad notes all the bad evidence that were brought during the cross-examination. You need to be clear. That is not the essential purpose of it.
Justice, I want you to begin this for me, and I'll go back to our other lawyers who are also standing by. The last 3 questions from Justice Aperu. In your own calculation, what was the total valid vote cast? Figures for Mr. Mahama and figures for Mr. Kufuor. How much of a contribution is this to the case itself? The questions that the judge asked.
Really, let's once again accept that the bench is allowed to also ask questions, as it were, clarify issues. They are not supposed to be doing the case for either of the parties for them, but they are indeed allowed to step in and clarify issues that they feel need clarification. And so that is allowed, and so nobody should be thinking that it's normal for people to start thinking that why is the bench now the lawyers for the respondents or what? But we should be clear on that first. Now, second, the 3 questions for me, if you look at the issues that were set down for trial, are germane, because at the end of the day, the determination of those questions would be the deciding factor as to whether the person declared the president is indeed the president of the Republic of Ghana or not. Because at the end of the day, the whole suit that we are presently witnessing comes down to one issue. Is the person in the office of the president of the Republic of Ghana? If the answer to that question is a valid yes, then the whole suit comes to nothing. So this is why these 3 questions were so essential. Now, to be fair, I was expecting these questions to come from the respondents rather than coming from the bench. I was seriously hoping for those questions from the bench from the respondents' angle, rather than allowing the bench to ask these essential questions. But I think, for me, they are the most important of all the questions that were asked. Indeed, no wonder it has become the highlight of almost every discussion, because really, that's what we all want to know. Is Nana Akufo-Addo the president of the Republic of Ghana? If the answer is yes, then the other matters in the suit may be matters that would help in policy issues going forward.
Okay.
But not to tilt the balance of the presidency.
Okay.
To another person's favor.
Okay, great. Let me get a quick reaction to that. Dr. Poku Edusei, Justice Abdullahi says that he expected those 3 crucial questions to come from your side.
Well, Mama B, I think that's his opinion. And we as lawyers for the second respondent also have a strategy. Last week we spoke about strategy in terms of litigation. We had these questions in our minds. In fact, those are what I call the jugular. They actually undermine the entire evidence of Mr. Stephen Ketia going forward. Because when they were coming to court, the claims they came out with was that no one crossed the 50% threshold, minimum threshold. And throughout, they had failed to give any figures as to what they themselves even got when they were giving copies from the polling stations to constituencies to region the copies they had, when they tabulated the figures they got, they had not put it out. We have a strategy. We decided not to ask these questions because after the case is closed, we are going to have what you call addresses, right? We are going to write written submissions and file it for the court to consider. And insofar as he has failed to provide evidence, we will not urge him when what evidence you have for you to affirm that opinion that no one got more than 50%. So we'll then bring it out in our submission that when the petitioner and his witnesses came to court, in this case, the petitioner has not even come. When the witnesses testified, none of them was able to give a figure that actually contradicts that of the Electoral Commission. So on the face of it, when the official body has given figures and you have failed to provide any contrary evidence to, as it were, to contradict it, it means that the official act that was done by the Electoral Commission should hold, because in this case, there's nothing contradicting it. So our strategy was that we're going to address the judges on it, that they don't have any figures. They just came here with conjectures and meant that they wanted to basically come and pursue their case through that of the Electoral Commission. So if you don't have your own figures, you couldn't have therefore formed a reasonable basis to say that no one crossed 50% minimum threshold. And therefore, the figures that had been declared by the Electoral Commission were germane, they were the true figures, and that's the official body that can actually declare numbers.
Okay.
And an addition to that is that, you know, when the video of the declaration was even played out, realize that certain figures were mentioned by the woman on the 9th of December, right? So that's why the accident issue of internal inconsistency came out. When you give a body of a narrative, and they mentioned that the first contestant, in this case, President Akufo-Addo, got 6.7 million. That of President Mahama got 6.2 million. In fact, when Otukono even conducted the press conference, he said that they got 6.1. So it means that at that time, they even didn't have the figures when they were declaring their 50.15 victory. So they didn't have that figures. But the Electoral Commission had the ultimate figures and said that you even got more than you had even declared in your press conference. It was 6.2. When these figures were mentioned by the Electoral Commissioner, the summation of the figures was not going to give you 13,470 something. No, it was going to give you 13,121. So if they themselves had summed up the figure, they wouldn't have come with jaundice claims that because the summation was wrong, therefore everything that we did on December 7th by going to our polling stations to go and stand in the sun to queue should be rendered, as you say, brutal fulfillment.
Okay, let me
matters are actually succeeded on. You don't just pick a little bit of an entire story and use it as a claim and thinking that that will substantially change the outcome of results, which the Ghanaians actually gave to President.
Let me go to Kojoga Daudu. Those three questions raised, what we've been talking about, did it show what the judges were thinking?
Yeah, Mama B, before I even get there, I think that whilst we are doing some public education, let's be a little bit decorous. I think when he uses the Malenet Francis jaundice claims in the court, I think that it's not fair to the petitioner and the lawyers.
I imagine that because it was used in the courts and there was nothing said against it, that's why
but the court itself,
he repeated it.
The court itself has spoken that at least we are lawyers. If the people on the street can use, there's a language that it's deemed right what we use in court. So that's mine. Now, let me come to those three questions. Now, the three questions that was asked by the bench wanted to see the figures that we have. It all tells you that there are going thinking along the way that if we had come to court and we are saying that there's declaration was wrong and it was unconstitutional, we should have added figures. That is not our case. The reliefs we have put before the court is that what is the actual declaration? And if the 9th declaration and the subsequent changes, corrections that have been made, what is the figure? Now, if you use the figure of the 9th December, if you put it, we are saying that it will not, the activities leading to that declaration will mean that nobody. So it tells you that the bench was expecting or is expecting that we put figures. And we are saying the official figures that has been put by the person who has the responsibility to declare, it's not right. And the person has also come to admit. So the essential issue would be now, by the mistakes that they have made and the rest, does it affect the validity of the results that she declared? I think that that is the main of our case that we have put, and I'm sure that it is coming out. That is why figures were not put in to go and say that we have these figures and these figures contradict. We have come and looking at the constitutionality of the behavior and constitutionality of the declaration. So that is why the judges asked that, or the respondent was asking that you don't have the figures which contradict what the Electoral Commission was doing. And we are saying that what the Electoral Commission did was wrong, and they themselves have even admitted that. So I think for me, the issue germane is that if it was wrong, which they have admitted, does it affect the validity of the election? I think that's the essential. Okay. Now, you see, where they were saying that we declared and said that the petitioner has won the election and we declare him, that was not the case. If you look at the video that was played, we said and categorically that we have 140 seats in Parliament. By what we have, the calculation 140 seats. Now let me give you some understanding to that 140 seats, why it's reduced to 137. By our calculation, when we knew Techima Sap was part of it, Sefiu also was part of it, Zabzugu was part of it. That makes it the 140. You will realize that these results were not declared. The parliamentary were not declared. Then on the 8th, we didn't hear anything from the Electoral Commission. On the 9th, nothing happened. Then on the 9th, evening of 9 to 10, these 3 constituencies I'm mentioning, they did not do collation. Then that is where we realized that the military or security personnel got involved, forced the Electoral Commission to declare the results without collation.
So, Kojoga Daudu, Dr. Pokodu say,
by a petition.
No. Dr. Pokodu say,
they are not part of the petition.
Okay, please allow me ask a question. Kojoga Daudu, kindly listen to me. I've got a question for you. We also had Peter Tokuno, the Deputy General Secretary of your party, in those videos played in courts, where he asked the supporters to go out there and jubilate because you had won the election.
Yes, that's what I'm explaining. That with the 140 we mentioned, we said we were cruising to victory. And people should jubilate because by history, we've seen anybody who has majority has the presidency. That's why that press conference was made. But not to declare that John Mahama has had this figure and this is the figure Akufo-Addo had. Now, those 3 that we are talking about, Sefiu also Techima Sap, Takwa and Swayim Zabzuku, are all in court because when they realized that that would be the majority, the security was brought in without collation and it was declared.
Okay, can I get something?
Let's declare it.
Can I also get some clarity? So what it means is that you do have your own collated figures, except that your witness didn't have it with him yesterday.
Yeah, that's exactly. He said that he doesn't have it with him, but we have the collated results. And the case that we took to court was not about the figures. It was about the declaration and its validity. And the discretionary power that was used against the petitioner. These are the three things that we took to court.
Okay. So subsequently, would you give us the figures? Or it doesn't...
I'm sure that today, if Pesa White gets into the box, Dr. Pesa White, gets into the witness box, I'm sure once he's answering questions, what he realized and what he got to know after getting all the figures from the constituencies when they come, or the polling station when they come, and what happened at the strong room with the figures, I'm sure he's going to eloquently speak on this.
Okay.
And when the figures matters, Dr. Pesa White will speak on these figures.
Okay, Justice Abdullahi, are we establishing that before you...
A quick clarification, if that's allowed.
Okay, please come in, yes.
Yeah, just briefly, Pesa White has filed what he's going to say in court. It's just adopted as his evidence in chief. So if he has not actually intimated about these numbers, there's no way he will then be able to come through the back door and have them. We have a strategy, and we will ask him questions that will advance our case instead of asking him to provide us with such additional information. That's why we didn't ask Mr. Asiedun Ketia those questions.
Well, who knows? And maybe the bench again could ask those three questions.
The General Secretary of NDC is more relevant in terms of coordination nationwide of the elections of the NDC than Mr. Pesa White. He was just kept in one room, what they call a strong room, in which he was just only being fed figures from the ground.
Okay,
so it's difficult for Pesa White to speak to figures nationwide.
Okay, all right.
Somewhere.
We will not.
I disagree with you. It's just to say that he's just a mere observer. He was there as a coalition agent.
Okay.
And what does he know?
All right, gentlemen.
What does he know?
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. But we want to move the conversation forward. Justice Abdullahi, are we, putting forward this issue that before you challenge the validity of an election, you must have your own figures? Is that the sense that you're getting? Hello, Mr. Abdullahi?
That is true.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Mama, can you hear me, please?
Okay, so I just want to be sure, I can hear you now, yes. I just want to be sure if what we are saying, I guess coming out from what happened in court yesterday, are we establishing the fact that before you challenge the validity of an election, you need to have your own figures?
Absolutely not. That is not supposed to be the case, except that each case is taken based on the special circumstances and the basis of the petition. It is the basis of the petition that will determine whether the figures are even necessary. Remember, we are not making the argument that if you challenge a particular election, it is solely on the basis that the numbers are not in your favor or the numbers have been tampered with. There could be series of grounds based on which you may challenge a particular election. And so if you advance your cause based on one of such grounds, for instance, assuming the person that you are challenging is election, your claim is that he's not a Ghanaian as in accordance with the law. You do not need figures to challenge this. And similarly, if you are challenging the person on the basis that, for instance, he's not of age, and that he's, for instance, below 40 years, you do not need the law. If you are challenging the person on the basis that, for instance, he has a criminal record or conviction based on which he cannot be a president of the republic, you do not need figures to challenge that. If you are challenging the person on the basis that, for instance, that person, for any other reason, is not qualified to be a president of the republic, you do not need figures to do that. But in this particular special circumstance, it appears that figures are essential to the determination of who is the president of the republic. So we have to situate this within that special circumstances of this case, and not to make a general assertion that before you challenge an election petition, you need figures to do so.
Just a final one to you three gentlemen. You're all lawyers. Yesterday, Justice Enin Yeboah had a word. It started with Frank Davis and said that the court was not comfortable with the comments after each sitting. Maybe I should start with you, Poku, to say, how has the team received this message? Of course, we saw Kojo Ponkroma address the press afterwards, so I guess that you really get the message. But does it bring any, in the absence of any word that's coming in my head, does it bring any form of shame or anything like that to the team?
No, not at all. I think it's just a general caution to all lawyers for cases that we do in our lives. I mean, lawyers tend to want to also win the court of public opinion. And Rule 38 of our ethic rules is there that when you are a lawyer in the case, you don't grant media interviews. We know it, but we still do it anyway. And the admonition that came from the Supreme Court is to the entirety of all lawyers in the country, that when you are a lawyer on record prosecuting the case, don't be granting such media interviews. And you also added that even if you are not a lawyer on record, don't go and be in the robes and the wig and all those apparels to be granting interviews to the media.
Isn't that a test?
I believe that before taking that cue, other than that, in the amount we've been touting.
Yeah, but just wanted to say that I remember the judge saying that a person of his caliber, if it was anybody else, that would have been fine, but for somebody of his state should not have done that. Didn't the team think that he was going overboard sometimes with his commentary?
Well, not so, because similar vibes were coming from that of the petitioner side, and they needed to be responded to accordingly. We've taken the cue. I believe they have also taken the cue, and going forward, we will abide by it accordingly. We have other very competent individuals who can speak to whatever is happening in the Supreme Court. The information minister designate is very eloquent in conveying our story. We have other communication persons who can also convey the story, and we will do so accordingly. So the Ghanaians are well informed about the rules in the case of the petitioners.
Kojoga Dawudu, the other test, put down your robes and your wigs, but on both sides yesterday at the press conference, you were wearing your robes.
No, there's the issue. I think that where it talked about being in the case, if you watch right from even 2013, whilst we were doing the case, the lawyers who mentioned their name are on record as the lawyers for the person, maybe that time was the respondent and now the petitioners, to not speak to the media. It is the legal team that some persons among speaks to the media. And I think it is only a reminder to us that if you want to speak to the media, you should not be in your full regalia as a lawyer. It is proper to be in your tie and a shirt that you'll be able to speak. So I think we have all learned from it. I think that, yes, the court was a little bit not too happy with Mr. Frank Davis because we all respect Mr. Frank Davis. He's a good lawyer when it comes to the bar. But I think that he was being carried by emotions as to some of the communication, and I think we'll all learn.
Shouldn't we say same about your team, because you also do the address, except that in your case we haven't seen a lawyer mentioned directly in the case addressing the media, but in terms of the vibes that you give, you also give similar.
No, I don't remember. I think that all the vibes that were coming from our opponents were all about to bring the towering image of our lead petitioner down. in the eyes of the public that he doesn't know the law, he doesn't know anything. But all we have been saying that this man is a gem, he's tall when it comes to the bar, and he has paid his dues. So we have a crack team, that's all. But I think it was becoming personal, which we also didn't like, that it should be personal. We are lawyers. We will finish with this case and we'll still go back to the bar. So I think that for me, the most important thing for us as lawyers when we are communicating is that the public learn from us. They learn some of the jargon, whether right or wrong, they learn these jargons, which they may not understand that it was not appropriate. So I think, yes, going forward, we have to be measured with what we say and how we communicate what happens in court. And I think that so far, so good, apart from one or two slips that the court has pointed out.
Justice Abdullahi, it was a double-edged, passionate appeal from Justice Eleni Yabua. The first was directly to Frank Davis, but the second leg, which I took notice of, was to say that for those who are not directly participating in the case, if you must address the media or make commentary, put down your robes and your wig. Yesterday, I didn't see any wig, but they certainly were in their robes.
Obviously, it's sad to say that even though all sides appear to be saying that they took cue, it doesn't look like they took enough cue from the bench. And but I think that advice or caution affects all of us, including my good self here, to the extent that if I appear on your station or any other station, I should be appearing as I am today, or at best with a tie on, or any other clothing rather than a regalia that will make me look like a lawyer. I think
your tunic shirt is making you nearly look like.
Today, I think Doc is really after me today. But with the greatest respect that I have for Doc, I would always reserve my comment because Doc is a gem for me as well. So, but like I said, we all should take cue from that. We should all learn to play by the rules. The rules are indeed abundantly clear. It is sometimes difficult to say the circumstances under which a particular person may be made a victim. I wouldn't want to be made a victim. I wouldn't want to be embarrassed. I wouldn't want to be caught pants down. And so I will strongly urge myself and my colleagues that we should all play by the rules. And we do not even need the Supreme Court to remind us of this because ethics rules are abundantly clear as to how we conduct ourselves in these matters, particularly when our commentary and our conduct are such that they may even affect the determination of the matter. It may also run into the realm of contempt. And so I think even you, the media, I think you should all be careful with the limit with which you can go or you go with your interviews and other things. I think so. I think we should all take a cue from it. We clearly see the Supreme Court this time not being too hard on these matters, unlike what happened in the last presidential elections, where people had to go to prison because of contempt. This time, we are getting all the signals ahead of time that we should all take appropriate measures to curb ourselves from falling foul of the law. Okay, just about 30 seconds. What are your expectations today? We'll have another witness in the box. Indeed, I do not see any miracles today. I probably foresee quite a boring day. Having read the witness statement of Dr. Pesa White and the line of questioning that happened yesterday, I do not foresee a lengthy cross-examination today. And indeed, I do not foresee the second petitioner in particular going into the details of the issues as they did with regards to the first petitioner, because really their whole petition is centered on the first witness of the petitioner. That's why sometimes lawyers call him the star witness. And so having had their day, I foresee a minor intrusion into the case today, because there is no way the second respondent, for instance, is going to allow this witness to undermine their case. And so what it means is that they will be very measured in the kind of question, the line of questioning, just so that he does not correct, if you want to call it so, the errors that, for instance, Asiedun Ketia probably might have done in his cross-examination or other things. So they will definitely attempt everything that would ensure that the kind of answers that are produced today are on the surface or and such that it will not go to the root to undermine the case of the respondent.
All right.
You can clearly see that happening. In fact, if you heard Dr. Eduse, he even hinted to onto that clearly by their strategy, they are not going to give this doc the room to as it were spoil their case for them. Definitely, you're not going to find that kind of questions there.
Okay. All right. But you still say it's going to be a boring day. So Dr. Poku Eduse, is it going to be boring? Would it be a boring cross-examination?
Well, it doesn't need to be boring per se, but we will not let him be all over telling different stories than what he has filed in his witness statement.
Okay.
You know, and it is not meaty. So Asiedun Ketia was supposed to have provided more meat for the case than Mr. Pesa White, because he was encountered in just a small room waiting for information to come. His narrative was that at some point I decided to go away because I was sent to go and see the petitioner. And then when we went away, the results were declared. So it was at the stage of Form 13. You know, they started from Form 10, 11, 12, 13. So all those forms of 10, 11, Mr. Pesa White can never speak to them. It was only in the strong room area. That's where Asiedun Ketia parried some of the questions which he will be asked to respond to, because he was there. And he cannot therefore say that Rejo Metununu was the one who only took the decision to sign. And therefore, it wasn't my decision.
Okay,
because
so
they were the two agents representing the petitioner in this matter. Going forward, if we don't see the petitioner or his attorney on the witness stand, this case has collapsed.
All right, so Akotampa won't take 5 hours cross-examining him, I get the sense.
Well, we'll take our time and make sure that his credibility, because of the answers he's giving are not accurate, we will confront him with it as well.
All right. Kojoga Daudu, this is, as they say, not necessarily your star witness. What should be our expectation?
I think that Dr. Pesa White is coming to put and will highlight the discretionary, the way the discretionary power was used by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. He would also come and say what he knows within his personal knowledge. And I'm sure as a doctor, cross-examination, nobody can limit you. I get the impression that my colleague, Dr. Eduse, is saying that it is only what it's on your witness statement that you can speak to. No, that's not the practice. Cross-examination, when they ask you and your questions, there can always be follow-up questions, and the follow-up questions
will ask other questions that will be related to what he has filed, mainly.
So if it is so if it is their strategy that they will ask questions that will bring follow-up or answers that they will have to probe more, then that is their strategy. But I think that Dr. Pesa White is going to say what he knows. He will talk about
your case is closed because you have only put in your case. So it means that you can't go to the market.
No, please, can we have some? When you were speaking, I didn't speak, so please, let me just finish. So I think that, yes, he'll be at his best. He's in good spirits, and I think he was even around yesterday just to see that he'll be able to. And I know him, he will speak his what he has put on, and any question he'll be able to answer and answer.
Okay.
So I expect a very good day.
All right. Kojoga Daudu, is there a reason we haven't seen the petition, I think, for the past 2 sit-ins?
No, you know, the petitioner had some few other emergency engagements that he had to do. So that is why, but he's ably represented by the running mate and the national chairman of the party. The top echelon of the party is always in court.
All right.
So if you check, you see that apart from him, the running mate and the top echelon.
We see them. We see them. I was just curious because he had been there from day one. But thank you very much, Kojoga Daudu. Thank you to Dr. Poko Edusei. And I am super grateful, Justice Abdullahi, for helping us with this conversation. Our election.
The fight against COVID is on many fronts, and occasionally we take you to ICUs to see how health workers are helping patients survive this deadly virus. Today, I'm here at the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens, and this is one of the centers, part of the front line trying to deal with this. And we don't hear often of what happens here, and that's why I'm here today to find out from the scientists who are sequencing to determine if new variants found across the world and even at our airports are in our communities. And you've heard the word, we've heard the president talk about this, but for many of us who may not understand how this process goes on, it appears it's delaying and creating some anxiety amongst us. So I'm here to find out from the scientists here what really it entails and how close we are to determining if these variants are in our community at all. And if you're a frequent watcher of News Desk, you know that one of my resource persons for COVID is Dr. Yao Bediako. Today, we are here in his office. Yes, it is his office. Doesn't look like a regular office, but he's hosting us, and we're going to learn a lot more about how sequencing happens. Thank you for hosting us, Doc. First off, tell us basically what sequencing is.
All right, nice to see you, Bernice, in person, not on Zoom. So sequencing is a technique that allows us to study the genome or the DNA of a particular organism. And so it's basically, if you think of DNA as a code and a code of letters, sequencing allows us to read this code and to decipher what the code means. So that, simply put, sequencing is basically just reading the genetic code of an organism. It can be a human being, it can be a virus, it can be a parasite. In this case, obviously, we're interested in the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So I can show you our sequencing facility, and our scientists there can explain how sequencing is done, at least so your viewers can see behind the veil, as it were. All right. So this is our sequencing lab. So I'll hand you over to Joyce, who's our manager, who manages our sequencing facility, and she will walk you through the process of sequencing, how we generate this data about the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
All right, thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Joyce.
Very nice to meet you too.
All right, and let me start off by saying thank you, because a lot of people don't realize that this is actually one of the fronts of the war, and we need to also win it on all sides. So basically, run us through what happens here with regards to sequencing.
Okay, so once we receive the sample, the raw sample from the patients, we usually do RNA extraction. The RNA extraction happens in another lab. Because of the infectious nature of the sample, we have to do it in a biosafety cabinet. So after we extract the RNA, we bring it here, and then we proceed to QC the RNA. So usually the QC happens on the other side, so we want to make sure that we are starting with a good quality material before we proceed for sequencing. Then after that, we convert it to cDNA. So after the cDNA conversion, then we come here and do PCR. So what we want to do is we want to increase the amount of the viral material in the sample. We come here, prepare our reagents for the PCR. This gentleman is doing. Okay. And then after that, we come here and add our sample to the PCR master mix that we prepared. Okay. So our sample addition takes place here. That's what this lady is doing. And then after that, we load it onto a PCR machine. Okay. So the PCR machine we have one over there. And then we run it for at least 3.5 hours. So that will help us to amplify the amount of the virus in the sample. So once we have the sample ready, then we proceed. This machine here is called a tape station. So this is just another way of making sure that we are preparing our sample well.
This appears to be a lot of work. How many samples are you able to run in a day?
So with the current personnel we have, we are able to sequence at least between 100 and 150 in a week.
And how many samples do you need, or just one sample can help you determine if we have a variant from a certain country within our community?
So currently, because we just want to see how the virus is changing.
Okay.
We don't need like a very huge sample size. We need at least a good number of samples just to detect in those samples and see if we have the mutation in those isolates that we've gotten from the patient. So this is where the sequencing happens, and the sequencing happens in these miniature devices. They are small, but they are quite powerful. So these are called MinION.
How many samples are in each device?
Currently, we are running 24 in each device.
Okay, but what's the capacity?
You can do up to 96 per run.
Device.
In this flow cell, this is where we load our sequence. So you just open this. Once you have the flow cell loaded, we load our sample into this. Okay, so you just pick up an amount like that. We usually load like 75 microliters and just load it drop-wise into this pot.
Okay.
So that's where we load our sample.
Okay.
So usually what happens during the sequencing process, we have in this orange yellowish area that you see, there's a membrane in it, and the sequencing usually happens in through what we call nanopores. So this technology is called nanopore sequencing. So they use nanopores that are small holes, like nanomolar in scale. So DNA is made of 4 chemical bases, which is A, T, C, G. So when we are sequencing, those molecules will pass through the pore. When each molecule passes through the pore, then the ionic current is disrupted, and then we can measure that disruption. So every molecule is going to disrupt the current differently. So that raw signal is going to now be converted into sequencing data, showing that how the 4 bases are arranged within the DNA that you're trying to sequence. Then after that, we get the data. So these are the files. When you look at it, you can't make sense out of it.
Okay.
But when you give it to the bioinformatician, then they will just, do the analysis and give it to us in a way that we can understand and see that there's a mutation in this part of the virus genome and all that.
Thank you for having us, Joyce. We're out of the sequencing room now, and just to get some simplification from Dr. Yaobedi, before we go to the analysis center where all the data is interpreted, tell us how many minutes or hours it would take for one sample run, and why this appears to be taking long, at least in the eyes of the public.
Yeah, so I think I hope what you saw from Joyce's explanation was how technically complicated the process of sequencing is. It's not that you just take somebody's sample and stick it on a sequencing machine and you get it. For a single sample, you are looking at anywhere probably about a total of 8 to 12 hours of total, work time for a single sample. When you now talk about doing many samples together, that significantly increases the time. So you have about 5 days of just generating the data, and then you need to give the bioinformatician, the data analyst, time to then analyze the raw data to make sense of it.
Isn't there a simpler way of doing it?
The general process of sequencing is very similar for what Joyce has showed you. The final step of loading it on the sequencing machine may differ depending on what platform you're using. But in general, the steps are the same. If you want to do this quicker and on a larger scale, we need to expand our capacity. I'm happy to say that in addition to WACBIP, there is sequencing going on at Noguchi and at UHAS. but in many ways, their facilities are not much larger than ours. This is the level of capacity we have in Ghana. And I'd also comment that there is a certain significant cost also associated with sequencing. So the flow cells that you saw her load on, which are consumables, they are things you load, and then once you're done with the run, you discard. That on its own costs $1,000. And indeed, all the reagents, they may not look like a lot of volume. All the little reagents you have to add, the magnetic beads she talked about for pulling out the DNA. When you put all of that together, the cost of sequencing a single sample is anywhere from about $100 to $150. So the 100 samples that I said we can do a week equates to $10,000 of cost. So if you want to increase capacity or increase the speed with which you do things, that has to be followed with significant investment from the government or from the private sector.
We are spending thousands of dollars sequencing. Is it just to know if this variant exists in our communities? What's the significance of knowing this?
Mm-hmm. So, we like to use our resources carefully. So we're not just sequencing for the sake of sequencing. It's very important that we understand how this virus is changing over time in our population. The first thing is, as you have heard, through sequencing efforts like this variant in the UK was identified. Even though we call it the UK variant, that's just the first place it was identified. And that is because the UK has invested significant resources in sequencing. The UK alone has done 200,000 SARS-CoV-2 sequences since the pandemic started. And by identifying that variant, they were able to pinpoint exactly why they had a surge. So we need to do the same if we are to understand why the virus behaves the way it does. Currently, we are seeing a surge. It may be because we have a variant that is highly transmissible. The next has to do with the vaccine. This virus is mutating, and over time, it will continue to mutate. The vaccines have been developed based on one variant or one variant of the virus. Now, over time, as the virus mutates, there may be, unfortunately, a situation where the virus mutates away from what the vaccine can recognize. Because there are few vaccines available. Each of those vaccines may target slightly different variants. And so it's important as a country for us to have a clear idea of what the variants circulating in Ghana look like, so that when the Ministry of Health goes to procure a vaccine, they have enough information to ensure whatever they procure is actually going to work for COVID in Ghana.
There's a lot to learn about this virus. Clearly, you can see the scientists themselves are doing a lot to understand how this virus works. Quickly, from here, we'll move to the Analysis Center, where Dr. Albediakon again will be explaining to us how they interpret the information they gather from sequencing. We've got a presentation ready for you. So over to you, Doc.
Thank you, Bernice. So this is just to help explain the final step in sequencing, which is really the data analysis. And just to recap where we are, samples were collected across the country because we're interested in understanding, the evolution of the pathogen in Ghana, but also understanding where perhaps variants are coming from. What we try to do with sequencing is understand the DNA code that is within, in this case, the virus. Now, different viruses will have different genetic codes. Variants are basically different forms of a virus. And so the way we classify variants is basically based on their genetic code. And so sequencing gives us a string of letters. You can see these letters here. These are basically the letters that are associated with the DNA. And what we do to identify variants is to try to find small changes in the genetic code that would classify a virus as being part of one variant or another. So when you get data, so Joyce and co have generated a lot of data for the sequencing. This is basically what you get. This is the whole genome of the virus, and each of these tiny
Well, let's cross over now to the Ministry of Information, the press center to be specific. There's an update on COVID-19, and Director General of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Patrick Kumabwaje, is speaking now. Let's connect with them.
did not record any new positive cases for this period of our reporting. Total case of admission is so far, those on admission is about 294. Total case of admission is so far, those on admission is about 294. 34 of them are critical, the 122 are severe, and the rest are mild. And that's an area we need to be more cautious of, and we would appeal that people should come in early so that we can catch more people in the mild to moderate stage before they move into severe and critical, which is very difficult to save their lives. So if you look at the table, we have them in the various hospitals across the country. That comes up to 294 cases, and the critical of 34. Majority of them are at the military and the Ghana East hospitals. KIA so far, total number cumulatively is about 1,136, as we've always been mentioning. And the total tests done is 152,000 plus, with a positivity rate of 0.74%, quite close to the cumulative positivity in the country, which is about 8.7. As we mentioned, we can see that in absolute terms, the number of cases reported at the airport continue to decline, maybe as a result of restrictions in travel and the fact that the PCR negative, we are tightening the control to ensure that they are really PCR results that they are bringing in. We have so far recorded 430. We recorded 430 in January, so that is where we are now. If you look at the previous month, we have 393 in December for the airport, but in January alone, we have 430. Let's hope that with the decline, February will give us fewer numbers into our active cases. The schools outbreak, we still have limited outbreaks across the countries. We've had some cases in Upper West, Western, and Greater Accra. Greater Accra, as I mentioned earlier, has cumulatively reported about 20 positives in a couple of schools. And the contact tracing and isolation is currently ongoing. We only have one person in Greater Accra who is currently undergoing treatment. When it comes to I think the protocols are very important, and we know that until the vaccines come, our face mask is a vaccine. When we had the last spike, when the face mask use went up, the positives also started coming down. Currently, we just done one on the 29th, although we did assess in the mandatory wearing of masks in the Greater Accra region, which is made a key center in Ghana. 6 target districts currently hotspots are Ayawaso, Korle Klote, were the areas we went to. We visited 43 communities in Accra, lorry parks, bus stop, busy streets, street intersections, overhead, under traffic lights. This is where we have a larger number of people in public and want to see what is adherence to protocols. The data collected on the 29th of January between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m., which is where there's a peak movement of people. We're also going to do some in the morning and the afternoon in the subsequent ones. So the good news is that about 42% of our people are now wearing masks appropriately. 36% were not wearing it at all, with about 22% wearing it, 22 not wearing mask at all, and 36 were not wearing correctly. So if I add those, we are looking at about almost 80% have the intention to wear. I mean, those who are wearing it improperly is still an intention to wear, and having the mask is a good sign. So we are seeing an upsurge in the use of the mask, and we hope it will continue and hit 80% appropriate use, and look at that. But when you look at the Ayawaso West, you can see that 57% are wearing appropriately. Korle Klote, 56%. Accra Metro is still low, 39%. Ayawaso East, 39%. Ablekuma Central, 31%. And the Ghana West is 29% wearing of masks. And you can look at the not wearing and then not wearing appropriately. So we looked at the community and location with proportion of persons observed who were wearing masks. You can see that the largest number was University of Ghana and Oponglo area, and the lowest number is around some of the lorry parks around the country, in Accra. Baleshi, etc., had relatively lower use of them if you look at them in those communities. And then you also look at the absolute numbers of people who are actually not wearing the mask properly, not wearing the mask at all. You can see that some of the mini markets, Nima markets, etc., are probably showing the highest number of 70,000, a large number not wearing the mask, about 73% not wearing the mask at all. These are the first one were the averages, but we are now going to specific areas to show you that there are certain locations where not wearing the mask is good. If you go to the GCB Towers area, where not wearing the mask is good. If you go to the GCB Towers area, you can see that the number not wearing is lower compared to the other areas. So if you look at the trends, we have moved off from I'm looking at survey 3 all the way to survey 8. We have moved from 18% not wearing masks, and we peaked at 72% in the survey 7, but that number has dropped to 36% now. If you look at those who are wearing masks appropriately, it was high as 44 before, and then it declined all the way to 10 to even at one stage 7%, but now it has moved to 42% again. So we are hoping, because of the scale, the two numbers have switched, but the 42 is for the green and 36 is for the red one. So that is so down the mask use. You can see we hope that to continue going up, and that will be a very good way of containing this thing. So in conclusion, compared to October 2020, the number of people wearing their face mask correctly have increased from 10 to 42%, and those not wearing the mask correctly have decreased from 72% to 36%. 78% of the people observed have intention to use the mask, and 20% of the people observed were not wearing the mask at all. And I think this is an important thing that we'll continue doing every third day to see how we move on. The proportion of people who were correctly wearing the face mask slightly higher among males than the females, and the proportion of people who were correctly wearing the face mask slightly higher among children than for adults. Ayawaso West District registered the highest proportion of people who were wearing the face mask correctly